Welcome to the workshop titled Literacy that Develops and Liberates Students and Our Own Thinking. This workshop will focus on the following goals: define terms, 21st century literacy, multimodality, and multi-genre, identify ways these terms fit into our philosophies of teaching and practicing writing, and practice multimodal and multi-genre composing. You are encouraged and will be asked to stop and start this video at different times. So please follow along with the video as well as the PowerPoint, and be sure to have your daybook at hand. Defining literacy. How do you define literacy? There are lots of different literacies that have been named over the years and in the research and study of literacy. One is functional literacy, reading and writing with sufficient skill to manage the routine demands of ordinary life and the expectations of the workplace. What do you consider to be the elements of functional literacy? What would someone have to be able to do in terms of reading and writing skills to function in society? The answer to that defines functional literacy in the current day and age. Content literacy. This is reading and writing with sufficient skill to manage the demands of knowledge specialized areas. So being able to read a science article or math textbook, a history novel. These are specific to a particular subject or specialty content area. Cultural literacy typically refers to writing well in standard English and reading knowledgeably those texts. And by those texts, we mean the great classics, the canonical literature, that typically in our society promote the values of American and European society. What do you feel like encompasses cultural literacy today? What are the things that if you're declaring yourself as a graduate English student, you should be able to write, be able to read in order to be culturally literate? Literacy for personal growth is writing and reading to foster every individual's intellectual, imaginative, and creative capacities. So these might be things that, unlike cultural or content literacy, would be found outside of the school setting, which is kind of interesting and sad all at the same time. Finally, critical literacy is reading and writing with a very distinct purpose, which is to critique the fairness of existing social arrangements and possibly work to intervene in collective processes for social change. So let's think about this for a minute. This is a moment where I want you to get out your daybook, and once the questions to prompt your thinking are up on the screen, I'd like you to take a moment to pause and do some daybook focused free writing. Which of these literacies do you feel like you possess? Which ones do you feel like you value? Which of these literacies were cultivated in school? Which ones at home? What about in other settings, perhaps at work or among family members? Take some time now to work through these questions. Welcome back. We're going to be moving forward thinking about ideas of literacy, and I will be referencing the information from NCTE, More Thoughts on 21st Century Literacies, which can be found by clicking on the link. As we continue to think about and define literacy, we have to realize that really it's defined by communications technologies, by your culture and your community, which means it's subjective. Your version of what a literate person is and my version of what a literate person is might be different. It's a way that people communicate with one another. It's always changing. It's not novel to our time. And the way to get at defining literacy in a certain time period, like now in the 21st century, we have to think about and ask, how do people communicate? And however that question is answered is how literacy is defined. Again, referencing the website and article, More Thoughts on 21st Century Literacies, we have this to chew on. We're in an information age where information is the primary form of capital. Reading and writing play a huge role in our contemporary society, more so than in past societies. Because we deal in the production of information, economics are tied to one's ability to read and write in ways that they haven't necessarily been in the past. So what we have is increased literacy demands in the 21st century, just for ordinary citizenship, just to function. Where my grandparents would not necessarily have had to be great readers and writers to have an ordinary quality of life, that's changed, and just in the past century. Time to think about it again. So pause the video, take a look at these questions, and again do some focused free writing. What do you think about the idea that there's a higher literacy demand today? Does this go along with or conflict with your views of literacy or illiteracy today? For instance, if you had to say and fill in people today and their reading and writing skills today, ... what would you say? How does this information from this workshop go along with or conflict with that idea? What about students? Students today, ... How would you fill in thinking about ideas of literacy? Take a moment now to ponder that in your daybook. Welcome back. We're now going to use and think about defining multimodality as an element of defining literacy today. So we're going to build off the idea that we looked at a few slides ago, that the ability to read and write in ways that they, society, haven't necessarily been in the past. So what we have is increased literacy demands. So we're going to focus on that idea of what are these increased literacy demands in the 21st century? What does that mean? What does that look like? We're going to explore the idea of literacy through this interactive site, Defining Literacy in a Digital World, which is connected to a Read, Write, Think lesson that I encourage all of you to go take a look at and check out at your leisure. So I'm going to ask you to work at your own pace through the following links. You can respond through the website, and I'll show you in a minute how that might work, or in your daybook. You're going to think about the following questions. What age group is this site for? What would a person use this site for? How would a person interact with the information on this site? What literacy skills are necessary? So let's work through an example together. So remember earlier I said you can work through this activity online, and this is the space where you can do that. This is an interactive instructional tool that will allow you to take notes and print your ideas as you work through each link, or you can use your daybook. If you're going to use your daybook, I advise that you use this link here and simply go to a couple of the websites rather than clicking on them through this website, but you can choose either one. So let's look at the Ad Council website. Here's the sheet where we would include information and type ideas as we see fit. And here's the website. The Ad Council, adcouncil.org. So looking at this site, let's remember our questions. What age group is this site for? I would automatically eliminate anyone probably younger than 18. What do you all think? I do see something about high school equivalency, so I might change my mind a little bit. But when I think of and see words like diversity and inclusion, job training and employment, food safety education, adoption from foster care, I'm not thinking about elementary school students. And it may even eliminate some older people in our society. Let's look at the next question. What would a person use this site for? Well, in order to figure that out, I might go to the About Us section and just think about the literacy skill that I had to use right there. How do I know what About Us tells us? How did I develop that? Is that just functional literacy? Is that content literacy? Is it something else? Is it cultural literacy? What does it tell you about my literacy skills that I was able to know that About Us would tell me what the mission statement is, which would then tell me what the purpose or why I would go to this site? So I could look through some of this information and decipher what the purpose is. So it seems like this is a public sphere, a public space to help provide information, education on programs and issues that make a difference. I could look at campaigns, and so maybe I would be looking for something to get involved in, so volunteer work. The Working With Us might help as well. Or maybe it would be to do research, so I could find news and events on certain public issues. The final question, how would a person interact with the information? What literacy skills are necessary? I have to know what to click. So I have to know that putting the mouse over these words are going to get me something. They're going to provide me with information. Otherwise, I might just sit here. I have to know how to scroll. Is that a literacy skill? I have to know that clicking is going to take me somewhere. I have to know that something's trying to be communicated through this image, so I have to have a certain level of visual literacy. I have to have a certain level of content literacy, knowing what these percentages mean. Then there's some social media over here. What is that? Is that cultural literacy? So continue working through. The next one is Amazon if you're working on this particular website, or again, you can work through the list on the readwritethink.org website. And as you're working through, answer these questions. You don't have to look at every single link. Stop and do this now, please. So how are you defining multimodality at this point? Let's get some clarity on that. So first, in the literal sense of the word, we've got multiple and mode, combining different ways of communicating in everyday life. We also need to understand the term text. Oftentimes when we say text, we say point to the text. We're often talking about literature and maybe helping someone understand how to analyze literature. But a text is a piece of communication as a whole. So when we expand that definition, text becomes a lot of different things, and multimodality helps us, understanding text in that way helps us understand multimodality. Mode is a way of communicating. So with multimodality, we have different modes. Linguistic modes, that's dealing with, for the most part, your black words on the white page, or spoken, written, organized, developed mode. Visual is color, layout, size, perspective. Oral mode deals with music, ambient noise, even silence. Spatial deals with physical arrangements, proximity between objects or people, the relationship between things. Gestural is connected to facial expressions, hand gestures, body language, interactions. Media or medium is the way in which your text reaches your audience. So the way that you're delivering the modes. Video, photo, paper would be some examples. Affordance is the idea of the strengths and weaknesses of the choice in media and mode. How they provide opportunities to communicate and what do they not provide. So sometimes we might say, what does this multimodality afford us, and maybe what does it not afford us? Some reasons why we would do multimodality, why we would think about multimodality in terms of composition. We're going to reference Rainey and Jewett and Kress in this moment. Those are two good people. If you're interested in more information, I encourage you to go check them out. So building from these characteristics of digital literacy, we realize that the argument is outside of school, young people are reading and writing across a new terrain, which is redefining what literacy might mean. And the impetus is schools must meet the demands of students, constant exposure to multiple literacies, and redefine their understanding of what literacy might mean. This coincides with those first few slides asking us what are the demands of 21st century literacies, and thinking about does that match what we ask ourselves and our future students or our workplace colleagues to do in the 21st century. Another thought from Jewett and Kress, unlike academic literacy, which is often stagnant, requires students to become literate by learning a set of skills, multimodality positions that meanings are made, distributed, received, interpreted, and remade in interpretation through many representational and communicative modes, not just language or linguistic mode. So we've processed a lot here. I want you to take a little bit longer time now to pause the video before moving on to the next section, part 2, where we look at multi-genre composition and address some of these questions in your daybook. How are those websites we just looked at multimodal? What modalities were used? What modalities do you feel like dominate school, your daily life? What are the differences, if any? What do you think about these differences? Take a moment now and do some writing.